Chirag and welcome to the video on forward proxy versus reverse proxy. So let's check out the difference. Starting with a simple definition of a proxy without considering forward or a reverse proxy. The proxy server is the server that acts as a middleman between the client and the server and vice versa. To define if it is a forward or a reverse proxy, we need to understand that on whose behalf the proxy server is acting. In the general scenario where a client wants the server to do some operation, let's say multiplication, and if they are in the same network, then the very simple flow will look like this. The client will ask the server that what is 7 into 7 and the server will respond with the answer that is 7 into 7 is 49. Now, if the server is sitting in some other network over the internet, then how the data exchange will happen? So to understand that, we will start with the forward proxy. The forward proxy is often known as a proxy, web proxy, or a proxy server. If someone is referring to these terms, then most probably he or she is referring to a forward proxy. The forward proxy server sits in between the client or a group of clients and the servers on the external network which client wants to access. In this scenario, all the traffic from the client will route through the proxy server. And the most important point is that a proxy server which is acting on behalf of a client or a group of clients is a forward proxy. Now let's understand with an example. If the client wants to access google.com, then the request will not go to the server directly, unlike the setup where client and server were in the same network. For example, the ISP server is sitting between the client and the server and acting as the proxy server. So, when the client hits the URL google.com in the browser, it will go to your ISP and then the ISP proxy server will make a request to the Google server on your behalf. The server will return the response to the proxy server and the proxy server will return the response back to the client. And the definition says that if the proxy is acting on the behalf of the client, then it is a forward proxy or a proxy. Within this setup, the server does not have information about who the client is because the proxy is sending the request to the server on the client's behalf. On the other hand, the proxy server knows who the client is, but server does not. Now let's take another example of the corporate scenario. The enterprise does not want their employees to access certain websites, so they block certain websites like social media sites. They also monitor the traffic of the corporate network. At the same time, they also hide the identity of the clients. So how do they achieve this? It is really hard to monitor and track each and every system of the employee if they were allowed to access the internet directly. So to resolve this problem, there is a need of a middleman between the client network and the internet or the external network which can intercept all the requests. And that middleman is a proxy server, which basically sits between the corporate clients and the external network. So when a client makes the request, it will go to the forward proxy server and the proxy server will validate. For example, if the request is made to allowed sites or a blocked sites within the corporate network. If the request is valid, then the forward proxy will make the request to the said server on the behalf of the client. And if the request is not valid, then the proxy server will return the response saying not allowed or invalid request. One of the advantages of the proxy server is that it hides or protects the identity of the client. So here the server does not have information about the client, it only knows the proxy server. Generally, in the workplace environment, the transparent proxy is used, which is one of the types of the forward proxy. A transparent proxy intercepts the communication at the network level. It also works as a gateway or router that authenticates the communication without making any changes to the request or responses passing through the server. Now let's go through the advantages or use cases of the forward proxy. Caching. Since all the traffic is going through the central location, your proxy server can cache the response which is frequently accessed and serve the request from the cache itself. Monitoring and logging. In a workplace scenario, it is easy to enable monitoring and logging on the proxy server as compared to doing it on individual machine. For example, a certain site is being accessed a lot, so let's cache this site. Block content. For example, in a work scenario, if enterprise wants to block certain sites, then it can enforce these restrictions via a proxy server. Bypassing restrictions. In contrast to content blocking, proxy servers can also be used to bypass restrictions. Let's say schools or universities provide limited access to the internet by blocking sites like social media sites. And the forward proxy can be used to bypass such restrictions. And the last one we have is the protect identity. Now while you access google.com, the client will send the request to the proxy server and then the proxy server will make the request on your behalf. So here the server does not know who the client is, hence the client identity is protected. Server only knows the proxy server and the proxy server knows the client. Now if we consider the workplace scenario, in the workplace scenario, the clients were sitting behind the proxy server and the proxy server was acting on behalf of the clients, which is known as the forward proxy. Similarly, if there are servers instead of clients who are serving the request of clients behind the proxy server, then that kind of setup is called the reverse proxy. It is just the reverse of the forward proxy. So the reverse proxy sits in front of one or more servers which intercepts the incoming request from the client and then communicates with the origin server. All the incoming requests and responses from the origin server will be routed through a reverse proxy server. So let's understand it via an example. Given the heavy traffic on the google.com website, behind the scenes, multiple copies of an application will be running on multiple servers to cater to the needs. Now here Google cannot come and say that, hey, server 1 is down, so please use server 2 and so on. To solve the scenario, a reverse proxy server will sit in front of the Google servers, which will take the request from the client and then it will forward it to any of the healthy servers. Let's say the reverse proxy is acting as load balancer and is doing round robin traffic distribution, then what will happen? The first request will come in, the proxy server will send it to server 1 to handle it. Then the second request come in, the proxy server will send the second request to the server 2 to handle, and so on. And here one thing you need to note is that the client does not know which server handled the request. And in forward proxy, the server does not know who the client is. So this is the reverse proxy in the nutshell. Now let's have a look at the use cases or advantages. Security. With reverse proxy in place, the servers do not need to reveal their IP addresses, which makes it harder for the hacker to do targeted attack on the server like DDoS. Another aspect of security is that the traffic that is coming in will have to pass through the reverse proxy server, hence the proxy server can be configured to serve as additional level of protection. For example, it can be configured to block the suspicious traffic coming from certain IP addresses. Caching. Reverse proxies can cache the content which is frequently accessed by the client and it can return the response without accessing or bothering the server. For example, static content sitting on the edge servers like CDNs. Load balancing. For example, for an e-commerce website, it will most likely receive a large amount of traffic and it is difficult to handle with a single server. Hence, it will run multiple servers to handle the traffic and the load balancer will make sure that load gets distributed evenly across the cluster of servers based on the load balancing strategy. Load balancing is nothing but an application of the reverse proxy. Then we have canary deployment. If there is a new feature that you want to test with certain amount of traffic, then you can configure the reverse proxy to send, let's say, 20% of traffic to this cluster of servers and 80% of traffic goes to another cluster. And then finally we have SSL encryption. Now as we know that encryption and decryption is a computationally expensive task for the origin server. Hence, a proxy server can be configured to decrypt the incoming client traffic and encrypt the outgoing responses to free up the origin server resources. Nginx is one of the reverse proxy. Then CDNs also act as the reverse proxy, which ideally serve the cached content near your region, and it also take the request of the user and forward it to the backend servers, right? So they are nothing but the ad servers. Okay, so moving along. In general, if the proxy is configured to act on behalf of the client or the proxy server that is sitting in front of the client who is requesting the stuff is known as forward proxy. Whereas if the proxy is configured to act on behalf of the servers or the proxy server that is sitting in front of the servers who is accepting and responding to the client request is known as a reverse proxy. And the final two main points that I am reiterating is that within forward proxy, the server does not know who the client is, and within reverse proxy, the client does not know who the server is or which server is handling the request. So guys, that was all for this video and I hope you found this video helpful. Until that time, if you want me to do tutorial on any use case or service, then please leave them below and I will try my best to come up with a tutorial as soon as possible. And if you have any queries or comments, then again please leave them below and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and see you next time.